So I'm here today with Kailee Billerbeck. Did I say that correctly?
Yes, yeah.
And she happens to be a senior at Chapman University. And the way that we met was online through social media. So I thought this was such a cool thing. Kailee reached out to me and said, I just want some advice. I would love to meet with you and pick your brain. And I get those messages all the time. And I usually reply back like, thank you so much, but my schedule doesn't permit. But there was something about the way you wrote this great message, and then I, of course, stalked you on social media, and I'm like, this is a girl with tenacity, and like, how ballsy is it that she just like reached out to me and, you know, pitched herself and made such a great impression on me. Let's do this. So here we are. Today, Kailee is going to officially pick my brain, and I said, just you can ask me anything you want. It's your show. So
Awesome.
Kailee, thank you for being here, and I'm excited to do this.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited. I have like so many questions, so prepare yourself.
I'm ready.
Okay, so the first one, when I was reading about how you purchased your first piece of land when you were 13,
Yep.
and just like thinking about being an entrepreneur, especially at such a young age and going through high school, I mean, there's so many extracurricular activities and stuff.
Yeah.
What did you have to sacrifice, like constantly being an entrepreneur and stuff?
Well, I think I should probably set the record straight and just be clear that it wasn't like I was an entrepreneur or thought of myself as a business person at that time. I had some money, and my dad suggested that I buy a little plot of land, and that it was a way for me to make income, but I didn't do anything. Like I just was like, okay, but like really it was him teaching me those things.
Okay.
It wasn't my idea. It wasn't I didn't manage it. So I don't want to make it sound like I was this extraordinary child. I think what was extraordinary is that my parents were always teaching me that there were ways to help people or ways to take your money, invest your money, and make money. And so the only thing that I remember about that is that every month, I think the payment was $40. Somebody rented that piece of land and put a trailer on it. It was like a really cheap piece of land in the woods in a very rural part of Michigan. Somebody leased the land and put their trailer on it, and they sent me a lease payment every month of like $40. But every month, my dad would have me open that up and see the check, and as a teenager, that made an impression on me. But I didn't do much with it. So I meet people all the time that will say, like, I really want to get my kids into business too. I'm like, yeah, do that. But don't expect them not to be a kid. Like, teach them the opportunities there. But like you said, I didn't sacrifice much in terms of being a kid. I worked a lot. I do think I didn't do as much social things maybe, or wasn't as dedicated to sports in high school as other kids, because I was so already caught up in the idea of like, wow, I could start something now.
Yeah, no, definitely. So what, like, I guess, because I mean, just like even as a college student, like you're constantly being told this idea of balance. You know, you need to find the balance between work and fun. And I feel like that's kind of the struggle, like at least like with my friends that we've kind of talked about, is where do I draw the line at like having a social life, school, and then also kind of pursuing something on my own, or even like if you have to work to make some kind of income and stuff. So where would you say like you kind of draw that line?
So let me ask you a question. You said that that's kind of a message, is balance, which is, I'm surprised by that, because I didn't ever hear that message until I was completely out of balance. And then, so I don't know if I was never hearing it, but it was out there. Yeah. Or if there's been this shift in society. So where do you hear this message of balance?
I guess to be fair, I hear it a lot from my mom. My mom is like, she's always been like my biggest cheerleader, but I kind of the same thing where I was like, I just felt like I've been so out of balance in college, and it's always been this thing of like, my mom's like, okay, when are you gonna like keep doing, because I was very like driven in high school, and then I kind of got to college and it was like a celebration of getting there, you know? So I kind of like pulled back from things I knew that were important. So I think pursuing what I really want to do. Like I've always loved to like pass along wisdom and stuff that honestly like my mom's taught me and I've learned from things I've done. So I think that truly is like my purpose, is helping teenage girls kind of.
And you lost sight of that a little bit when you first got to college? Okay.
Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah, and I think it's good to lose sight, to kind of be, like you said, out of balance, to find that balance.
Yeah.
You have to kind of feel the extremes. I know you were talking about that in one of your podcasts. When like you guys were in debt, you know, you kind of had to like see both sides in order to kind of understand.
Yeah.
But so I guess I wonder if it is something that's being more so like heard in society, because even like my friends, like some of my good friends and stuff, like we talk about finding that balance.
I also think it's who you're paying attention to, right?
That's
so
true.
There are certain, like I know you're a podcast listener. I'm a podcast listener, and I watch YouTube videos, and I think it depends on who you're watching. Like, there are certain people, like, I just don't even watch them because they make me feel like I'm not doing enough. They make me feel like I should be hustling harder. And even some of my early mentors, virtual mentors, like people who I watched online, that was kind of the message, like, be first in, be last out. You can outwork people. In fact, I watched someone the other day, just like a random person on Instagram, and I was like, oh, I love this guy's attitude. He's like got so much tenacity, and he's just like believes in himself. And then I heard him say, but I will outwork everybody. I'll grind 20 hours a day. And I thought, that lost me, because now I really try to just, what I allow into my brain is what grows. And so I try to block out people who have that message of like grind, hustle, sacrifice. Now I'm like, it's what's important to you. And for me, balance is important. Yeah.
So kind of going off of that, one of my questions was, do you think like you would have gotten to where you are today had you not, because I know you had said like you worked really hard and you were like, I'm out of balance and it's not working for me, but do you think you would have gotten your business to where it ultimately led to if you hadn't done that?
That's a really good question. It's like, what came first, the chicken or the egg? And I will often hear people say that. They'll say, well, don't you think you had to have had that time where you were hustling so hard in order to have the amount of success where you can create balance? And I would say that is not true. Because I've seen it. I've seen many people who are smart like you, who are figuring it out before they fail. That they're like, okay, so there are other ways to do this. There's a way to do this where I don't have to destroy myself, and I can actually enjoy the things that I love. So if you're smart enough, I don't think you have to hustle so hard that you fail or be so out of balance that things suffer in your life, important things. But it's a matter of listening to wise counsel and like having faith and believing, because hard work feels like you're accomplishing more. But I always think smart work is better than hard work.
That's really true. So what would you say is smart work as opposed to like going all in and kind of being out of balance?
Good questions. Okay, so that
putting you on the spot.
Right. No, that I think the key to smart work is slowing down. And I just realized I don't have my rings on. I feel so naked.
I always feel naked when I don't wear them. I'm like, what?
Am I single? Just kidding. I think smart work is to slow down and not have a scarcity mindset that if I don't do something very fast right now without thinking about it and take advantage of this opportunity is going to go away. I think to work smart is to slow down, strategize, figure out, okay, first of all, does this make sense? Is this the right next step? Who else can help me? How can I make this easier? What are the long-term consequences? Why is it I'm doing this? And if you do those things, you always do the right thing instead of just doing things.
Yeah.
And in the past, I would just do. Like I didn't know how, I didn't give myself permission, I should say. I knew how to strategize, but I felt like I'm in too much of a hurry to be successful or to get to that milestone that I never slowed down to go, okay, let me think about this. Do I really want to do this? Does this make sense? Is this the right step with my priorities and where I want my life to be?
Okay. So, and I know a lot of people would say that like social media kind of contributes to that feeling of like, I need to do it now, and like you're seeing what everybody else is doing, but you had this feeling like when you were first starting off, right? Yeah. So would you say that it is necessarily social media, or like how else do you think that message of like needing to constantly stay on top
I don't
of things?
even know how your generation is going to cope. Like, I think it is horrendous. Like, I love social media, obviously. It's how we met.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
There's so many awesome things about it. I think you can learn, you can be inspired, you can, have connections. It's insane how many cool things there are, but it's also scary how bad it can make you feel.
That's so true.
And how just detrimental it can be to your mindset. Even myself, I really have to set up, even no matter where I'm at today, I really have very specific boundaries when I open up my apps, because I'm so fiercely protective of my mindset that even if I see a quick image, in my mind I might flash a quick like, oh, I'm not as fit as her, or oh, wow, she's on vacation and I'm not. Like any flash of that is negativity that I don't want to feed my mind, and I just did that intentionally. So I'm very careful about not feeding myself those things, but I worry that people will mistake inspiration, motivation, and believe that that's helping them when it might actually be making them feel worse about themselves.
That's so true.
Yeah.
What kind of like steps do you take to protect your mindset, like especially with social media?
Yeah. So I have to be self-aware and realize, like, even though I love this person and maybe they're even a friend, but every time I look at their social media, I have to be honest, I compare myself.
Yeah.
Then I unfollow them or I hide their posts. And I'll, and that's hard because you're like, oh, is that person going to notice I've unfollowed them, right?
Exactly.
But it's like, it's what I have to do. It's what I have to do. I'm very careful not to look at the Explore page. Explore page will kill me. I'm like, because your eye goes right to that like half naked girl or the, whatever, the things that you're like, and then you look at it and then you get more of that because Instagram or whoever, Facebook gives you more of those things. And I always feel really good about myself. I feel great about my body. I love my life. I love where I live. I love everything until I look at Instagram. And then I'm like, oh, wow, I should be more,
Yeah.
So I really am very careful. I don't. Like people say, did you see such and such on social media? I don't, because I only follow people who I know, like I'm having fun catching up with their lives. I find them motivational, inspirational. I know that those people aren't trying to make me feel bad. It's my own thing, but I just don't expose myself to it.
That's smart.
Yeah.
Okay, back to this idea of more that you're kind of talking about. My friend, he's like always kind of been like my silent cheerleader. He'll just like send me like random inspirational things. And
is this a friend from college or high school?
From high school.
Okay.
And so I had posted this quote about like raising your standards and like kind of like pursuing this idea, how it is important to want more in whatever aspect of life you're passionate about. And we kind of got into this debate almost about where do you draw the line with more? So like, because I know that there is like definitely the perspective of, like in his perspective was, well, it can teach people to like have anxiety or feel depressed about not having what other people have, and maybe they don't want to go on to be like a famous whatever X, Y, and Z. So but like my perspective was, but if you're like, even if like, like I look at my mom she's so passionate about being a mom and she wanted to be the best mom she could to my sister and I. Exactly. So I would say that's pursuing more.
Yeah.
And so I guess like to you, what is more when you talk about more, and how do you safely pursue that?
Oh, that's such a good question. This girl. More for me is growth. That's more. So growth might mean I'm learning to be a better human in a way that feels right. More for me doesn't mean collecting more things or having more people know me. It's me knowing specifically where I want to grow, and those areas might make me more money, but that's not the reason why I want to be, the reason I want to grow. I want to learn to be a better communicator. I want to learn to be more empathetic. I want to learn that, like, all the things I think about that I'm pursuing that are more, I think make the world a better place. So that's the way I gauge what things I'm going to go after. And I didn't always think that way. I think I know at one point I really wanted more notoriety. Like I remember picturing a building with my name on it, but like, why? Like, what is better? What's great about that? Like, but I pictured it because in my mind I was like, oh, that would really, I'd arrive if I had a building with my company name on the side of it, or I would arrive if I lived in this certain neighborhood. And then once you get there, you're like, oh, well, this is unfulfilling. Now you can get there and be fulfilled, but I think it's why you pursue that makes you feel fulfilled or not. And I think when we pursue things, you feel pretty empty when you get those things. Yeah. So for me, it's growth. Okay. That's what more is for me. What's more for you?
I think I would say the same thing. And I think that for me, something that I'm really passionate about is making sure that we have that growth and that idea of self-improvement, no matter what that looks like for you as an individual, from a young age. And I think that we commonly, like, I mean, a lot of my friends listen to podcasts, but then a lot of them don't. Okay. So I think that, and I mean, honestly, I didn't even know what podcasts were until like August. Like, I'd never really heard of them, and my friends were like, you have to listen. Yeah, no, and I like, it's like this whole nother world, and then like, it's like a secret society kind of.
I know, you're like, why am I in college? Just kidding. Just kidding, Mom.
But it's true. It's like there's so much of this stuff, but there isn't necessarily that growth. It's kind of instilled into like even like teenagers and stuff. And I think that
You're
that's
right.
like, we really need that. Like, do you see that that's kind of
1,000%, yeah. Where are you going to get it other than your mom and dad, maybe your faith, and the people around you, right? But I think it's rare. And I always wonder how much of this is DNA, like how much of it, like you were just born this way, and how much of it is the people we have around us. I do believe that everyone can acquire a taste for it, like a desire for it. And I think that taste and desire comes when you experience how profoundly happy you feel when you recognize you've experienced growth. Like where you're like, this is fun. Like I can learn new things. I can be, terrible at it at first, and if I apply myself, I can get better. And that's how we feel alive. Like growth makes people feel alive.
Yeah.
And so I think once people give themselves permission to not be good at something, because that's what happens before you grow. If you give yourself permission to not be good at something, it's so rewarding to feel growth.
Yeah.
And I think anyone can feel that. But I do think it is something most people experience later in life, unless they have great influences around them, like great parents or mentors or people of influence. And sometimes, like I think about people who I grew up with and their parents were frankly horrible parents, don't even deserve the title. But how did these people turn out amazing? Well, they turned out amazing because they had a sense of like who was healthy around them and who they should align with. And I think that's a DNA thing, right? Like I've got friends who their childhood is just horrific, but they knew from looking at what was going on in their family, like this isn't healthy. Maybe this is what not to do.
Yeah, definitely. How do you think that we start to, I guess, change that? And it's hard to reach teenagers because a lot of what you learn, like you said, is what happens in the house. Like you learn from your parents and you see them as, or if maybe you don't have parents, that contributes to it too, or your teachers and stuff, but sometimes they don't always have the time to invest in just you. So how do we change that?
One person at a time. I think sometimes we feel like our influence needs to be global. And I really think you can make the most profound difference by affecting one person. But I've also learned you can't want it for someone else, So sometimes you see someone who's got this incredible potential and they just don't believe. They don't believe in themselves. They haven't experienced the things that you've experienced, and you want to show them all the possibilities and like to hold up a mirror so they can see who they really are, and they're just not ready for it.
Yeah.
And I've learned not to, I don't want to say waste energy because that sounds bad, but I've learned to go, when someone's ready, like that's the best place and person to use your energy on. And when you're trying to force it for someone who like they don't want it for themselves yet, you're taking that energy away from someone who is ready. And does see it.
Totally.
So I think most people will find that, we hope, in their own time.
Where do you kind of like, because I know like you've talked about a lot how like you love to help people, and I think that like that's something that I really resonated with, because you see people and like you see the beauty in them, and I think a lot of it does come, you kind of mentioned empathy a little earlier, like you see maybe why they're doing what they're doing, and it's like I know where we could just like tighten this and like and you'd be like set and you could achieve like X, Y, and Z and like really flourish. But where do you draw the line of like wanting to see the good in them and help them out and be there for them? And kind of having to say, okay, but like I need to preserve like my sanity also.
Yes. Okay, that's a hard lesson I learned, because I would kind of like feel like I had failed if that person either didn't see it, didn't take the advice, or just wasn't having it. It wasn't the right time for them, and I would see it as my own personal failure. Like this person is my project. I'm going to take this wounded bird and I'm going to nurse it back to health. And in doing so, I realized that had become a distraction. Like that was a way for me to not have to deal with my own thing. It's much easier to be trying to help someone who's way down there than realizing like you've got things you need to fix. So for one, I had to recognize the reason why I was doing it was self-serving. It wasn't an altruistic, like I want to help this person. I was doing it because I wanted to feel better about me. So that was number one, was recognizing what was motivating me. And then number two was, once I figured that out, I still want to help people. I'm still drawn to doing that. But now the boundary that I set is that person must be making progress. Like if they're even if it's crawling, if they're not crawling, I can't drag someone. So I will, like, for example, random people will reach out to me. And of course I have my students, but like even with my students, if they'll reach out and ask for something specific, if I give them like, here, you should do this, and then I don't hear from them again, I'm not following up with them. You've got to be able to take the ball, own responsibility, and run with it. And if I don't see people understanding their own personal responsibility, then I'm like, okay, I love you, and maybe it's not the right time, but I can invest more time in that person. So, and I even have close friends where it's like, yeah, I want to just go in there and give them 10 things they could be doing that make their marriage so much better or make their business so much easier. And I'll throw a little nugget out there, and if they don't reel it in, it's like, okay, I still love you. It's not my responsibility to control your life.
Yeah. It's
God's responsibility, and so I just have to like let it be.
Have you found that like being able to kind of see like maybe where other people could kind of like improve themselves or like improve their situations, have you found that because you have that mindset, people almost take it personally, like if like you're trying to help them, or maybe if when you've got to this place of having that balance, that they almost like kind of took it personally?
Sure. Yeah, I think I have a tendency to be a know-it-all. And I've had a mentor of mine point that out to me, like, you have a tone sometimes, Chalene, when you're doing your videos where you're almost like, you seem annoyed with people. I'm like, I do? I'm like, that's because I am. But it's, I'm not trying. It's just, I get frustrated because it's like you're kids and you want them to make the right decisions and it seems so obvious. So I that's something I'm working on personally because I do. I know I'm a know-it-all. I have to catch myself. I also know I'm better at it, especially with my closest friends because those are the people I care about the most. So those are like little sisters. But I'm not their oldest sister, but I treat them sometimes like little sisters. I'm like, you need to do this, and you need to do this, and you need to do this. And some advice I take and some they don't. And I'm learning now to at least wait for them to ask me for advice and not just, be telling them what to do.
Yeah. What do you think? Okay, so I've been like obsessed with the idea of empathy. It's my whole senior thesis is on empathy.
Really?
So I've been really fascinated by it. Do you think that empathy is this key thing that helps you kind of see through different things with people and where maybe they could improve certain areas of their lives?
Well, you're the expert, so tell me, that we're on the same definition, how do you describe empathy?
Being able to put yourself in somebody else's shoes and really experience the emotional states that they're in and kind of like from their background and maybe where they've been in their lives.
Yeah. Do I think that I have, what was the question?
So do you think that empathy is a key piece in being able to kind of see through some of like these facades that we all have in society?
I don't know if it helps with that, but I do know that empathy and emotional intelligence are like the ultimate advantage. Because you really understand, if you have strong empathy and emotional intelligence, you don't take things so personal, so you have fewer obstacles in that regard. You can understand, you are so much happier because you can see things from other people's perspective and it gives you a deep understanding, like a view from 30,000 feet. So I think it's one of the most valuable qualities you can have, and I think you can learn to be far more empathetic. I know that I personally found, I don't know if you found this to be true, but the more hurt and wounded people are, the less empathetic they are.
Yeah.
Not all. And those people who have like a really tough exterior and very little they give people very little grace. They usually they're doing that from a self-protecting place. Like they want to protect themselves, so therefore I'm going to judge everybody and I'm not going to see it from their perspective. And once you can teach people like how much easier it is on you to actually be empathetic, you can start to build those traits. I think that every day I learn to be more empathetic because I still recognize that I have judgment of people that stems from me not having enough awareness. And every year I'll meet someone who it's like, wow, you've changed my perspective on fill in the blank. and every time, so it's just like as I get older and as I meet and open myself up to just being open-minded to other people's experiences, that empathy just makes life so much richer, so much fuller, and you just understand like everyone has a story.
Yeah. I remember I just listened to your podcast, and that man that you were sitting next to at the conference who
yeah.
had that like crazy story and stuff. Knowing about somebody's past, like so much, it's so important in being able to understand why they're doing what they're doing, and like you said, to not take it personally.
Yeah.
Have you found that you've ever been like kind of called sensitive or anything for having empathy, and how have you dealt with that?
Yeah, definitely. My husband is a very black and white thinker, like, so he's learning to have more empathy. And he's also teaching me, I think, sometimes to, because I can say, I can see it both ways, and I usually can. I'm like, I can see how they would have thought this. Two people have an experience and they describe it in two completely different ways. And are they both wrong? Is one right and one's wrong? Like, I think they're in most cases, they're probably both right, because they come at it from their own experience. And I think at times my empathy could definitely could be labeled as being naive. Because sometimes or too forgiving, or forgetful. Sometimes I just forget, or I'm like, oh yeah, but if you consider how they were raised or what happened to them, that's why they did this. So sometimes, but I still think it's better to be empathetic. Like, I still think you win when you're empathetic.
Yeah. And sometimes, like, I don't know, I know for me, like, I'm such an overthinker, so when I know people's stories and why they're doing things, I just, like, I sit and I think about it, and like you said, seeing things from so many different perspectives. How do you channel your empathy and your understanding of others so that it's not driving you crazy?
Okay, so yeah, that's learning not to worry, right? So understanding that it's out of your control, and there's so few things that we can control. And so I put that in the category of worrying, like, worrying about what someone's going to do, or worrying about how they're going to take care of themselves. And for me, it's my faith. I just have to remind myself when I catch myself doing that I'm trying to do his job, and I can't control that. He already has a plan for everybody's lives, including mine, including someone who I care about. And when I'm trying to control that or worrying about it, then I'm not just allowing, purpose to take hold in their life.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's just learning to just like, well, there's not much I can do about that.
Yeah, that's so true. I kind of carrying through this idea of empathy, do you think this helped you be able to, I know you had talked about when you were really wanting to go into group fitness and stuff and be a personal trainer, do you think that being able to see from another perspective helped you overcome those failures and people turning you down, to maybe understand where they're coming from?
I don't know that I relied on my empathy to keep persevering fitness. So, in the beginning when I first moved to California. So I was teaching fitness classes in Michigan. I was going to Michigan State University. I was teaching on the campus, teaching at a small Gold's Gym. And then when I moved to California, I'm like, do you guys want to hire me? Like, I thought it was sweet. And I kept going on these auditions, and I remember they were, like, I knew 5 minutes in, like, oh wait, I suck. Like, how did this happen? I'm bad? Like, I'm bad. I knew I was bad. But I didn't understand, like, how did this happen? I was good in Michigan, but it was just a different standard out here. Like, wow, it was a different standard. And it wasn't empathy, although maybe it was, like, yeah, maybe it was a little bit of empathy that I didn't think, oh, they just don't like me or they're rude. I was like, oh, they're trying to make the best decision for this gym, and I'm not on the same caliber as these other instructors, but I know I could be. So I didn't give up, because I knew in the back of my mind, I'm like, oh, I know I'm not good at it, but I know I could be. Like, there's certain things you pick up and you're like, yeah, I'll never be good at this. But there are certain things you pick up and you're like, you know what? Like, I'm not great, but I know I could be good at this. And that's how I felt about fitness.
Yeah.
I felt that way about fitness. And I also wanted to help that woman who I knew it took so much courage for her to just walk into a gym and exercise with other people. I wanted to help her. I know right away when I first started taking fitness classes, I would see the people in the back row, and I could sense and feel how anxious they felt and uncomfortable, and how much courage that took. And so I always wanted to they were the reason why I wanted to get into fitness.
Being dynamic like that is so important. Like just being able to kind of like sense that with people, and you would talk about was like social anxiety and making people in a room feel wanted, and kind of being able to feel that perspective and taking on the role of like going out there. And
you listen to my podcast. I like you.
I love your podcast. I'm like, oh, Chalene again. Chalene.
Love it.
And I so kind of going off of this idea of like perseverance and stuff and starting small. Did you find that it was difficult to start small? I know I had read a quote by Brendan Burchard, I think it was, on Instagram, and he was talking about people kind of don't take you seriously when you're starting off small. So maybe like even going into those auditions, had you had more credentials or something or higher positions, they would have taken you more seriously. How do you overcome starting small?
Okay, so this is just an honest answer, and I don't know if it'll help people, but it's just my honest answer. And I never thought anything I was doing was small. I always thought it was bigger than what it was and more special. And I think that's because my parents brainwashed me. I mean, I was fortunate enough to have, like, and I realize this now as I'm an adult and my parents are staying with me and they have all these grandkids, and they're like, your nephew, Luke, he's like a bodybuilder. He's 4. You know, I'm like, really? And then I see him, I'm like, he looks like a 4-year-old to me. They're like, he's got definition, this kid. And they talk that way about everybody in our family, like, he's got super, I think he's going to be. And then, like, my daughter, they're like, she is the most beautiful, stunning girl. She's going to be a supermodel on an international level. Like, the way they talk, that's how they talk to us. So we had this, like, I had this overinflated, perhaps, belief that I could do anything and that everything I did was a big deal. And I think it worked to my advantage because I've never questioned myself. I always feel like, this is a big deal. I just did this. It's a big deal. So I always was excited. Whatever it was I was doing, I always thought it was as big as it was going to be. I didn't know it could keep getting bigger. So I never felt like anything I was doing was small, even though, like, now in retrospect, I'm like, wow, that was like just the beginning. I just scratched the surface. So that's my honest answer. Yeah,
that's such a good mindset to have. I honestly didn't really even think about it in that perspective. So that's it's nice to hear that, because that's something that I've kind of been grappling with a little bit lately. So
with which part of it? Which part do you identify with? Like, do you think, wow, this is small, or do you think this is a big deal?
I think that switching my mentality to, wow, this is a big deal, is important. And it kind of makes me think about, even I know a lot of people talk about this, but saying if my message reaches one person, then I'm doing good.
Right.
And I think for me, obviously it is starting a little bit smaller, and I plan to continue to work, but making sure that I am realizing that, like, that it is an accomplishment to touch even 2 people. And when people reach out to me about things that I post, if they resonate with them, there's always at least 1 or 2 people. So realizing that, okay, we're on the right track. So I just got to keep going, keep persevering, and don't stop, you know.
Do you accept it when people give you compliments and point those things out, like, dude, you're killing it, and you did this, and you do that? Do you acknowledge those things?
I'm getting better at them. That's one thing that my mom's really talked to me about. She'll say, and I know that you talk about this in your podcast too, when somebody compliments you, stepping back and saying thank you. And not excusing it, not saying, oh, well, I did this, this, and this.
Or belittling it or making it sound smaller. Well, I think that's really important. I have a good friend who didn't grow up with that positive affirmation, right? And I think you just can't be understated. I had such an advantage. Like, when people are like, oh, your success, I'm like, I have 2 parents who are like the ultimate cheerleaders and positive, happy people. I didn't grow up in an abusive home. Like, I didn't have to overcome, and I always felt like that was a disadvantage for me. I'm like, wow, no one's ever going to call me resilient because I haven't had to overcome anything. I mean, I have now, but like, I look at people who've overcome their circumstances and survived abusive childhoods, or, you know, maybe a parent who was addicted, or, you know, physically abusive, sexual abuse, like these kinds of things. I'm like, that blows me away. The resilience of those kind of people, I'm beyond obsessed with that kind of resilience. And I often find that those kind of people, like, they've done amazing things and they don't have someone there to say, like, that's huge. You know, so it's like learning to recognize, like, yeah, you're right, that is huge. People in my situation are shooting up heroin on the street. Like, it's a big deal that I've gone to college, or that I've maintained this marriage, or that I have healthy children despite the way I was raised. Like, that's a big deal, and I think people need to learn to celebrate those things.
Yeah, I agree.
Acknowledge them.
I was talking to my best friend Hannah, and we were discussing how
Shout out to Hannah.
she's amazing. I don't know what I would do without her. But we were talking about how a lot of motivational speakers we've listened to, just even in high school, having people come and talk to us, a lot of them are those stories of like that insane resilience. Do you think that it's sometimes hard for kids who maybe haven't had those? Because that was kind of something that I felt too. I didn't really have one of those huge
Stories.
triumphs. Yeah. But then I looked at my mom who did, and to me that was just like, oh my gosh, like, I don't know, I idolized her for that.
Yeah.
But do you think it's hard for kids to relate sometimes to those motivational speakers that are coming into high schools and talking about these big things? 'Cause it's almost like we want to like have those things that we've overcome to feel successful.
I don't know about you, but I just find the more I talk to people and ask them questions, they do have those things. Like I think what's more rare is someone who hasn't had crazy obstacles to overcome. So if we're talking about that rare instance of someone who had like the perfect idyllic childhood, great parents who were positive role models and everything was perfect and you had a picket fence and all the things you needed, like that's a pretty rare individual. But even that individual is going to experience great challenge. And I was always worried about that. Like, when is that shoe going to fall? Like, I was always afraid of that. And then because I was like, will I be able to handle it? Will I have the tenacity, the determination, the resilience that these motivational speakers have, like to overcome? Or will I curl up in a ball and like, will it be over? Will I be a changed person? And when those things did happen in my life, I remember going, okay, I am who I think I am. Like, even in these tough times, I just do what's right. Like, just do the next, that's always been my thinking, is like, just do the next right thing. And as long as you know who you are in those tough situations, you don't have to worry about what everyone else is going to do, because you're like, because no matter what happens, I will do what I know is right.
That's an interesting point you bring up about staying true to who you are. I guess I've been grappling with this a lot lately, and actually I was thinking, because this is one of the first episodes, so I told you I was doing a little podcast and thinking about that. So that was the first thing I talked about, is how to figure out who you are. And I think especially for people my age in college and stuff, figuring that out is really hard, because we're around so many different groups and we see so many various activities as normal. So if you're in one group, one thing's normal, and like maybe you're a certain person with them, but then if you change your friend group, maybe you're friends with these people, you're this person. So how do you figure out who exactly you are and come back to your core self?
Wow. I don't know how to answer that, because I've always just done me and not worried about it. So I just have to tell you, I don't know how to answer that, except to not worry about what people are thinking about me. Like, to do what feels right with the people that feels right. And, when something does, like, pay attention to those ding, 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 like, this doesn't feel comfortable. This doesn't feel right. Like, to pay attention to those things and honor your feelings, like, listen to your intuition and just follow that. And because I always did that, I don't think I ever struggled with, like, who am I and what am I?
One thing that we did I had a child development class, and we had to go back and ask our parents, what were we like as a kid? And it was interesting going back and asking my mom. She sent me this little paragraph thing about what I was like as a kid, and I actually just posted this quote on my story.
Was it a surprise to you?
It was a little bit. I think that, I don't know, this quote that I posted was, there was a girl that I played basketball with like way long ago, and she posted it, and I was like, oh my gosh, this resonates so much. And it talks about how you need to be who you are before society got to you, and before you started acting in relation to what your culture says is okay. And so that idea of like going back to your childhood self was really interesting. Do you see like parallels between like who you are now and who you were as a child?
My parents are staying with me right now, so I'll go home and ask them this tonight. But I think I know, because my parents read every parenting book available. Like, I remember parenting books out when I was growing up. And so they were always trying to be better parents. I was aware of that. And because of that, they were always kind of telling me a narrative as I was growing up. Like, you're the leader, you're the creator, you're the funny one, you're going to make, they would always tell me this narrative that was a really positive narrative, and I was living up to it. And so I think that, what narrative they're going to tell me about what I was like as a child will be interesting. But I suspect they were telling me that narrative all along as I was growing up. And I think I very much today who I probably was as a kid. I mean, I think about things I did like in elementary school and middle school, and yeah, that's pretty much on par with who I am today.
What are some of those things that like you did that like you think back to?
I was always trying to organize a group to do things like, okay, this is what we're going to do. And, you know, like my senior year in high school, I remember I got everybody. I'm like, okay, first day of school, it's going to be a funeral. And we're going to all wear black. And we're going to come in on our first day of school, and we're going to come in like 3 hours late to school in rows and rows and rows of black limos. And so every and P.S. I rented the limos and charged every senior a fee to be in the limos, which of course there was, you know, a little padding in there, so I was like making money on them too. But I thought, this is funny and it's exciting and it's different and we're really going to make a statement and I'm going to make some money, you know, like, so I was always doing something that I thought people would find funny and interesting and make a statement and like just live life big. But I was always trying to get other people to do it with me. I was always recruiting people, you know, whatever it was.
That's so funny. I love that. If you could give like any advice to your younger self, knowing what you know now, what would you say? Because I know you said you're pretty like consistent from like who you are today versus who you were.
I probably, and maybe it has to do with the fact that I'm 5'2". So there were a lot of times when I was, especially in college, and because I had some business success and I was working with adults, like a lot of adult males. I worked as a paralegal and I, you know, had my All Michigan Auto Swap Meet business. I remember thinking, they don't see me as being important enough. They think I'm this dumb blonde law clerk, you know? So I was always trying to like get into debates and like prove my intelligence or prove my business sense or just, I was always trying to prove myself, and especially to men. And I, you know, it wasn't like I thought they were like, I guess I just didn't think they took me seriously because I looked like a little blonde girl, you know? And I would tell my younger self, like, don't worry about it. Like, you don't have to prove anything. And because I think that sometimes came across as obnoxious, you know?
My parents were kind of talking about before I came to meet you, they're like, Chalene's like so, like you can just tell she's so dynamic and confident, just the way that she talks. And so I guess my question to you is how did you find that strength and that confidence and that is even exuded when you're just speaking over a podcast?
So I have a dialogue that I play in my head, and I've mentioned this before that I think some people either play a dialogue that they've adopted from a negative influence in their life, which is a shame because now you're playing a tape that doesn't belong to you, a recording that doesn't serve you. But you can, whatever tape you play over and over in your head, it becomes part of your reality and part of your beliefs. And again, to give my parents credit, and I'm hoping that maybe some parents are watching this and realizing what influence you have over your children. But even those people, if you didn't have parents who did this for you, you have to play that voice of someone who said something amazing to you, and you just have to keep playing that on loop. Because that's what gives me confidence when I start to feel insecure moments. So, you know, whatever it is, we all have insecure moments, and I do too. And when I have them, I flip on that tape. And if I were to play it out loud, people would be like, really? That's what you think? But I'm boosting myself. I'm trying to make myself feel and believe this, because if I believe these things, I deliver with that authentic feeling. Like I really come through for other people as opposed to worrying about what they're thinking about me.
It's crazy how much of life is such a mental game. It's bizarre. And I don't think people realize how strong your mind is.
Yes.
It's bizarre to me.
Mindset is everything. It is everything, but it can be changed.
Yeah.
It can be a skill. You can learn it.
Absolutely.
You know, and I think, again, so much of that is what we're surrounding ourselves with, right? So if you're around people who are like always complaining and always pointing out negative things, you're giving those people power to influence you, whether you realize it or not. You think you're being nice. Like I have a few acquaintances that, I hope they don't see this, but they'll reach out to me over and over and over again. And there's a reason why I'm intentionally always busy. Is because I can't spend an hour with someone who just complains and complains and complains. I just can't. Love you, but I can't do it.
Yeah.
You know, and sometimes you meet people and you think, oh, that's a really great person. And once they feel comfortable, it's just like complain, complain, complain. You're like, I can't do it.
Yeah.
Can't do it.
Have you found that like people saying those negative things, have you found that it ever influences the way you see yourself? And how do you overcome, if someone sees something negative in you, but you know your intentions, how do you overcome the fact that you're still making them feel a certain way even though you're not meaning to?
That's hard, because I've let that get me mad before. Like if someone's like, has made a allegation about me and my intentions or my character, that makes me really mad. And I have to let go of that, I'm learning to, and learning to recognize, like, okay, why is that so upsetting to me? Why am I so angry that they've made this accusation? And realizing that it's because it's a really important quality. And I've lived my life, in my mind, the opposite of that. So to have that kind of allegation can be upsetting. And I'm just learning to recognize it's their perception. And I can't take away from that. Like you're entitled to your perception. And then also recognizing that there may be some truth to it. And maybe that's why I'm so hypersensitive to it. Like maybe there is some truth to it, and there's an area for me to grow.
Do you find yourself, will you apologize for those things even if you know your intention was good? Will you still just say you're sorry because they clearly feel a certain way?
Depends on the person. Because sometimes if I'm just being honest, if I think I've offended someone, but they're offended because, I don't know, their own beliefs or whatever, I'm not gonna, if I've done right, I'm not gonna apologize because that's their perception, unless it's someone I really, really care about, right? But I'm trying to think of examples of this, like people, a lot of times it comes down to faith. People say, like, I'm highly offended that you, whatever, mentioned God or whatever, refer to your faith, and I'm like, I'm sorry that you're offended, but I'm not sorry that I shared that. And other situations I can think of, like on a more personal level, like if I, in the past, have had relationships with girls, with women who were insecure, like, you really hurt me because you weren't available, whatever. I'm like, I can't take care of someone's emotional needs. And so someone who might, like, it's their issue, I'm going to have empathy for the way that they felt that way, but that they questioned my intentions. It's kind of on them, and so I don't hold that. I don't sit with it. I don't let it bother me. And I know it's kind of their issue, because I have friends who, they worry so much what other people think. Like, let's say they get invited to a baby shower and they can't attend. And so they tell them, I'm sorry, I can't attend because I have to do this conference. They'll worry endlessly that person was upset with them. I'm like, if they were upset with you, who cares? You did what you had to do. Like, I don't worry too much. If I've done the right thing, I can't worry about what you think. I just have, I'm more concerned with doing the right thing than doing the thing that's going to make me feel like that person likes me.
So how do you keep your intention in check? And how do you make sure, because we all have emotion, we get like frustrated or defensive or angry at people. So how do you make sure that you're always trying to do the right thing?
I go slower. I think it through. I try not to make quick decisions. I have learned to say, that sounds awesome, let me think about it, or let me get back to you. I try to give myself enough space to be able to think it through and really be self-aware of what are my intentions. Like right now, today I'm struggling with a decision, and I'm really struggling with this difficult decision that I have because I'm questioning my intentions. And I think that's okay. And I haven't given my definitive answer yet because I need to be certain about my intentions and not fool myself or, convince myself that my intentions are good, and doing something that just might serve my ego or my business. I've got to do it for the right reason. So I just try to make those decisions slower.
Yeah. So what kind of advice because I feel like part of knowing your intention is knowing yourself and overcoming, I know you talk a lot about therapy and overcoming past traumas in order to figure out who you are, why you do what you do.
Yes.
How would you suggest if someone, let's say, didn't want to go to therapy, how do you suggest overcoming getting to know yourself?
So I think most people, they have an idea of who they are, but what we don't always understand is why we think the way we think, why we respond the way that we do. And some of the things we do subconsciously, right? So for me, one of those things, which I would have never discovered had I not gone to therapy, never. I don't care how many books I would have read. I just don't think I would have ever discovered why I was a workaholic. And I also don't know that I would have ever recognized that it was an addiction. I just believed it was a badge of honor. Like I'm like, yeah, it's a good thing to have. It's work ethic. So, for that reason, I really believe that therapy is the ultimate, quickest, most direct way to figure that out, especially if you find a good therapist. But aside from that, it's reflection. And I think you've got to go back to the first time you felt a certain way. And that usually keeps going back and back and back all the way to childhood, you know? And so much of what we do and how we respond and the way that we think relate, and sometimes our skewed way of thinking relates back to something that happened very early in our childhood. And not that we can blame that, but you can definitely go, oh, that's where I started to form this belief. That's where that belief started to form. And then so much of the rest of my life, I've been looking for evidence to support that belief, or unknowingly setting up circumstances to support that belief. And the more experience and evidence I had to support this belief, the stronger and more powerful that belief becomes. So in other words, to disassemble a false belief, you've got to go all the way back to the beginning and go, oh, the root of this wasn't even accurate. And that's a tough, tall order for people who are afraid to do therapy. But I think there's less intimidating, less expensive alternatives for people. There are apps now. There are I'm trying to think of like the names of them right now. Don't come to me. We'll put it below in the show notes. But there's a couple of different great places online where you can meet a therapist online and do online face-to-face therapy. Yeah. And I think that's really powerful. And then aside from that, it's just being super self-aware and wanting to grow.
I think kind of tying in even like empathy to this, I think that, so one of the things I talked about in my classes, I'm so fascinated, I'm sure my friends are tired of hearing about it, but I'm fascinated by like psychopaths and sociopaths. I'm learning a lot about that right now. And a lot of the root of that is empathy. And sociopaths,
a lack of it.
Yes. Yeah. And they teach themselves to not have empathy for others because it hurts them. So do you think that those people who have this like deep-rooted idea that they can't be empathetic to others or let others in because it's going to hurt them, they don't want to be vulnerable, do you think it's possible for them to work through those things and I guess kind of re-blossom themselves and get to know themselves? And at what point do you think it's not possible to go back?
I don't know. Do you listen to any of those horrible podcasts about, do you listen to Sword and Scale?
Yes.
Oh.
And Dirty John.
Horrible! These people, I don't know. Listen, I've listened to too many of those episodes. My answer before listening to that podcast would be, of course anyone can turn into a human being who's loved and cares about other people. But after you listen to that podcast, you're like, okay, without a doubt, evil exists. Like, it's scary. Like, sometimes I'm like, I feel like I have to just, like, wash myself after listening to some of those.
Yeah.
So I try not to listen to too many of those. But sometimes you're like, guilty pleasure. But I think anyone who wants to change, grow, have to want it. And unfortunately, not everybody does. Not everybody wants it, you know. We've got to wrap it up, but I want to ask Kailee a question. And that is, Kailee, what do you see your future looking like after you graduate? What do you predict you'll be doing?
That's a hard question. I'm right now trying to grapple with whether or not I want to go to graduate school. It was something that was really, I had never thought I was going to go. But I talked to one of my professors just a couple months ago, and he was like, if you want to, I feel like my purpose is to help bring these ideas we're talking about and bring them to teenage girls. I think that there's such a lack of help for teenage women trying to overcome adversities, especially in today's society, and helping them see beyond the present because we are so influenced by the situations we're brought up in. But so he was talking about how he thinks that going to graduate school would be helpful for that. But the hard thing for me is I don't want to approach it from a therapy kind of position. I want it to be more of working with them to attain their goals and just overcome like friend drama, family drama, you know, that kind of stuff. Just have it be like an older sister to them. So I'm really trying to figure that out. But I do like self-help blogging, and I'm trying to start like a podcast. So I want to continue to pursue those for sure. But
what's the name of your podcast?
It's going to be Beyond the Surface.
Beyond the Surface. Good name.
Yes.
So my advice to you would be to continue doing that, and don't wait till you have a degree, right? Like I think the degree helps in terms of credibility, but I think what's going to prepare you is doing what you're doing, right?
Yeah.
Like you're already doing it, and so to continue doing that, your blogging, your the way that you come across in social media, doing things like this, your podcast, that's going to give you so much more experience than an advanced degree. But the advanced degree is going to give you that credibility that you don't necessarily need, but it's nice to have, you know? I mean, if you can.
Would you pursue the degree?
I think about it all the time. I tell my husband, I'm like, okay, so I'm going to go back to medical school. And he's like, what? And like, if it changes every other day, I'm like, okay, no, I'm going to be a psychiatrist. No, I'm going to be a psychologist. No, I'm going to, so I'm always thinking about it because I love to learn, but I don't necessarily need it, I don't think.
Yeah.
Interesting story. So when I first moved to Southern California, I was working in the fitness industry, and this is in the early 90s. Like personal training was booming. Like now everybody's a personal trainer. But back then, like that was a big deal. And I'm like, I want to be a personal trainer. So I met with this guy who was one, and he's like, you know, you got to get your certification, you want to do this, you want to do that. And I said, okay. And so I looked into the certifications, and then I went back to him and I said, so what certification are people like most looking for? Like, what are they impressed by? He goes, I don't think anyone's ever asked me if I'm certified. I'm like, huh. And I got like 9 certifications, but I don't think I was ever once, other than when I get hired at a gym, but client-wise, I don't think anyone ever asked me if I was certified. They looked at how I trained them. So I think it helps if you are looking to establish that credibility. It certainly doesn't hurt. But don't let that stop you. Like, don't think you need a degree to start a business. Don't think you need a degree to start helping people and offering advice and mentoring others, because the best experience you'll have is actually doing it.
That's so true. That's very helpful. So that's something that I really grapple with, but I feel like it's really about, kind of like we were talking about with the personal training, it's about your testimony. Like, who are you as a person, and where have you gotten yourself, and are you somebody that I could follow because I like what you're doing?
Right. That's right. Well, it's been so awesome to have you. I'm so impressed.
Thank you. I really appreciate you having me.
This one is bright. And let us know what you think about this interview below in the comments. Let us know if you think Kailee should do more of these interviews. Great interviewer. Actually listens to the answer. Because I know you had a list of questions there, and you went off script because you were listening.
Thank you.
Such a great skill. And guys, be sure to follow her in social media. Make sure you download her podcast, which will be up and available soon on iTunes if it's not already. And thanks for tuning in.
Thank you.